Hi friends, welcome to the new lecture on setting up Active Directory in Windows Server 2022. In this short lecture, we will configure the first domain controller in the forest. That being said, let's have a look on the domain controller pre-requirements. The machine that you are trying to promote to the domain controller, you need to have a few of the requirements. The first one would be the server must have a static IP address. You know why? Because if it is keep on changing, the clients cannot communicate properly with the domain controller. That's why you need to stick to your static IP address. Followed by, you need to have administrative privileges so that you can promote that machine or the device to domain controller. And also you need to have a proper domain name along with the proper server name, right? So the server name most probably based on your company naming standard. Let's say if I want to configure a domain controller, I cannot just like go as a DC01 or DC1. Instead, I would give the country and the location and then the function of the server. That being said, let's see. You can see on my screen that INHYD hyphen DC01. IN represents the country code and country name as India and the place as Hyderabad, HYD, and a short 3-letter code hyphen functionality of the server. So in this case, it's a DC01, meaning I might have additional DC also within the same location. That's why I have given it a name. In case if it is a file server or maybe configuration manager server, I would go for INHYD hyphen, if it is a file server, FS01. If it is a configuration manager server, CM-1. If it is a SQL, SQ, and then give the number. That's how you would normally give it. That being said, let's also look into the major steps that you would follow to configure your domain controller. There are two major steps that you would be performing. The first one would be the installing the Active Directory domain services role on a server. So in the past with the 2003, we used to directly do the DC promo command, but that's no more supported, right? So we need to install a server role and then we need to promote directly from the wizard domain controller. As I said earlier, we will be creating the first domain controller in the forest. That being said, let's jump into the demo. Windows Server can be managed with the Server Manager in an easy way. So if you open up Server Manager, open Server Manager from Start button under Administrative Tools, and once you open, select the local server and try to configure IP address by pointing to Ethernet, and that will open up the network connection. Double click to open the properties and then Internet Protocol version 4. Select it, give the IP address. So I'm just giving here an IP address of 10.0.1 and with the default subnet mask. In case if you have the default gateway, try to configure so that your packaging or routing would happen properly. And then preferred DNS. This is where we are going to install the domain controller. So on this machine along with the DNS. That's why I'm giving here my first DNS server as the same IP address which will be on the same computer. So on the same computer I'm going to install the DNS server role and we will be integrated a DNS with Active Directory. Right, that's why I would give here as the same IP address. In case if you want to get the internet, you might be giving like this a different IP address, that is your ISP's or the naming resolution server, and then you could give here DNS suffix that you can give it here. In my case, I'm giving as a mydc.local, so I'm going to make this as a domain controller name later point. So I'll just click on OK, apply, close the settings. So we configured the first requirement, which is the IP address. Now the second thing is I want to rename this computer name. So either you could open up your Powershell to simply rename with a command as the rename -computer -computer -new name and a colon. I can give here as a INHYD DC01. This is going to change the computer name automatically. If you see, the current name is win-a random name which was created. So if I restart, the computer new name will be affected. So let me give a restart of the computer, executing a command to restart directly from PowerShell. So in a couple of seconds, in a 5 seconds time, it's going to reboot. Once I relog in to the server manager will show up the proper name, and we also configured already the IP address and the computer name. The next step, you need to make sure your time zone is correct, and the device also in a production must be updated with all the latest patches. Then proceed further with the domain controller prerequisite. And also that I've already logged in as the domain or the local machine administrator account. You see who am I. It will show me as the administrator, and I have full permissions to change the things. So now I'm going to proceed with the 2 steps that we talked about, installing the server role called domain controller specific role. So we will just click on next, select, click on next. This is where we would be selecting the Active Directory domain services, and click on that. It will show up, pop up the required, all the dependency roles also gets added, including some of the features also. So we would simply click on next. That would actually gonna install the Active Directory's domain services role. So click on install. This is not actually promoting your domain controller. Once you install the role, you would be promoting that. With a simple click here, promote this domain to domain controller. In case if you missed out, just close this and you have your warning button. That's where it's going to say that, hey, finish this role to promote the server to domain controller. So click on that. That would actually ask you to promote the server to domain controller. So we said that we would be creating a new forest, new domain. In case if you have already new domain, you want to create it in a new existing forest, you should be choosing this, and this is going to be additional domain controller and existing domain controller. So in our case, this is a first domain controller in a new forest. So I would give here mydc.local, as that's what I wanted to name it, example. So ideally this would be not the .coms or the root domains. We would be giving something like .root or .local, something like that we would be giving. But most of the in a production environment, they follow that standard, not the routable non-routable domains. Otherwise they might have a conflict. So click on next, and in this step it's going to ask you forest and domain level functions. In this case, if you have older domain controllers, for example, and then you want some kind of functionality, you could change it. But in our case, there's a new forest, new domain, so we're okay. And this is a password that will be used to in terms of configuring. This password will help you to go into a command prompt mode with the Active Directory DSRM, that's a restoration mode. To enter it, this is a password will be used. Click on next, and this would actually create even DNS role. It gets installed automatically, and now it's actually verifying the NetBIOS name. NetBIOS name is useful in terms of identifying your network devices over the TCP/IP, especially on Windows networks. So click on next. That's a name it has taken as a mydc, and after the .local, whatever the dot after, it was not taken. In case if your computer name is more than 16 characters, it would be no result. So only the 15 characters are used. And in a production, we always change these values to a different drives, to a different folders. Like NTDS would go to a NTDS folder, and sysvol goes to a different folder on a sysvol. But in our case, it's a test lab, so I would be going with the default things. And for your information, this is where the database, this is where the logs of the Active Directory will be stored. And this is the ntds.dit file. Directory information tree will be saved. This is a logs for the directory information tree, and this is the sysvol for you. All kind of your group policies would be stored under sysvol folder. And click on next and review all these possible options and click on next. So we know that we will have the administrator password remains the same on this machine, whatever the admin password was there. So that's a password it's going to use. So it will again gonna check every prerequisite, and then you will have an option to click on install. So this is a warning that it says that, hey, if I want to do an automatic reboot, I would be not doing it. That's what it says. Click on install. That's gonna install the domain controller, and also it does that automatic reboot also for you. Once the server is ready, you can log in with your credentials that was used previously. It will automatically open your server manager, and you could have your already installed domain controller, and you have the Active Directory specific MMCs. And now as the next step, we would actually look into the DNS. As a first step, you can see here my DNS. I have already SRV records got created with the proper DC name, and also the sites that we have. The current site is a default -first -site name, and the protocols that are used for the TCP like a Kerberos, LDAP, all of that is actually showing. Along with this, you also have your SRV records. SRV records are very important. These records will help you to locate your domain controllers from Active Directory. And also you see here we have currently our domain and then only the forward lookup zone. We do not have any reverse lookup zone. So that needs to be created by us, and if not, your reverse lookup zone, if you do not have from IP address to host name, the naming resolution doesn't work. Let's say if I just go back to my command prompt and try to check my IP address, for example this, and if I put it ns lookup and then I put my IP address as this, it might not show what is this IP address is associated with what computer name. And also if you see, it is actually going to #1, which is the IP version 6 of the 127.0.0.1. So let's actually configure. If you remember, we configure our Ethernet controller with the proper DNS IP address as the 10 series along with our 8 series 8.8.8, but it has automatically taken out. That's how it's going to happen during the migration or during the installation of Active Directory. So I would be giving here the proper name, and then I'll also give here my DNS information, and make sure that you also have this. Will not go here, but you could give the proper details of your DNS server. Now if I go back to my command prompt again and try to do ns lookup, if you see in the past you are actually getting as the request timed out. Now let's have a look on it. What would happen? You still got the 2 seconds of the delay, and default server is completely unknown. So let's have a proper configuration with the DNS. So we will configure your naming resolution for the reverse lookup zone. So right click here and create a new zone, primary zone. This is going to be to all DNS servers running in the domain controller called mydc.local, and this is my in fact this is my server running on the domain controller in this forest. The entire forest gets this. So IP version 4 and the IP address series is 10 series. So the last octa will not be taken, and this is how reverse lookup zone looks like. 0.0, it's a reverse. If you read like 0 0 0 0 and 10 dot in hyphen address dot arpa, that's how it's gonna use it. So simply add a integrator, which is recommended, finish, and later on you need to get the records, whatever the records are available here as a host record. For example, this is my domain controller. I'd simply go here and update this record as a PTR record also. Then if I just do a quick refresh, I would get here my PTR record. If not, you could actually create a new PTR by pointing to the host record. In my case, if I have a host record as this, I would simply click on this and click on OK, so that I would get this record. So that's the second method. Now if I just exit and try to do ns lookup, and you see the magic now, and I try to put the IP address as the 1 IP, and this time it's able to show my proper IP address, host name. Since we have domain control is ready, let's click on the start button and go to administrator templates or administrator tools, I would say, and open up your group policies. So you could see here, this is where you have all the default policies are already configured, like a domain controller policy. There's a default policy as well as the default domain policy. Both policies are already configured and it's available as a default. And you could also verify your other configurations like Active Directory, users and computers, and also the sites and services. And you should be able to create your OU structure, and then you should be able to create your users. In fact, you can directly create, but I would always recommend to have a proper OU structure based on your business flow, and then you can have your users, computers, groups, and whatnot, based on your business representation. Your OU structure can be created. That concludes how to create a domain controller in a new forest as a new domain. I hope this video is useful for you. Thank you for watching. In case if you like it, give it a thumbs up, or you have any other comments or recommendations, please do post in the comment section. Thank you.